Okay. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to, good morning, yeah, good morning. I am very tired. I'm sure all of you guys are too. Sunday be like that. And welcome to Anyone Can Sew. I'm Hibiscus Stitch, and I've been sewing since 2005, so hopefully I know a thing or two that I can help you guys with. I hope to share with you things that I've learned along my journey, from the basics to common mistakes to things you wouldn't think of and more. I'm not the only plush maker either. There's so many out there, so I can't wait to show off several plush makers from our own community who have each had their own plush making journey, and many of them have even shared their first plush with me, so that way I can share it with you and you can see that everyone starts somewhere. Also, if you guys have any questions at any time, don't be afraid to ask. I can't really see you guys from here, so feel free to just let your voice be known. So, oh yes, panel is now. That's what's happening. I see that. All right, so I'll go ahead and show you a bit of where I started. These are some of my very first plushies. Most of them are made with felt because that's just, I was poor, a poor child with like $5 allowances. So felt squares, 25 cents, it worked out. When I first started, I just wanted to make things that didn't have toys because I really like the weird characters and things, and I want to have toys of them, so I started making them myself. I remember asking my mom to take me to the craft store because I saw someone else in my grade school sewing a little plushie, so she took me to the craft store. I got some of those felt squares. I got one of those cookie tins full of sewing supplies, and the rest is history. Back up there, there you go, there you go. He's a little droopy, that's okay, I am too. Today is very tiring. So I started sewing before Etsy was really a thing, and there were no resources online yet. So a lot of my first few years were just the wild plushing west. It was just trying to figure out what to do, and that's why a lot of these look really bad. But luckily there's a lot of resources for you guys now, so yours will look a lot better than these. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. None of these are my first plush. I'm sure some of you have seen this before, but my very first plushie is this Link here. He is beautiful, I guess. Pride is not the word I'm looking for here, but might be hard to tell, but this is Link from The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. He's got thread all over him. His face is drawn on with a Sharpie. I'm pretty sure his belt is barely glued on. I still have him though. Always keep your first plush, because if you ever are stuck or have art block or think that you're bad at making plush now, just go back to your first one. You can see basically how far you've come. But luckily it was all uphill from here. This is to get Link off the screen because he's very embarrassing. And this is what will happen to you as you sew, and with whatever art or hobby or life change you decide to do. It'll be really messy at first. Maybe not this messy, but it'll be messy. But as long as you keep up with it, and the more you get into it and learn from it, you'll get better. The hardest thing about sewing, or any project really, is getting started. Because while it can be fun to imagine what you can do, and it can be really fun to take that first shopping trip to buy all your supplies, it's also going to be really intimidating to look at everything as a conglomerate whole, because it gets overwhelming. So I'm hopefully going to be able to take it and break it apart for you, so that way it's not so intimidating. And if you don't know where to start and you see the whole of everything, yep, it's easier to just break it down. And okay, here we are. So we will start with what you want to make. So this website right here, this is So Desune, and this is a website I highly recommend for people just starting out. She has amazing resources here. She has free patterns. She even recently added some free My Little Pony patterns of all the main 6. So it's a great place to go and find some free patterns and get to work with them. There weren't really any free patterns when I first started out, which would have helped me get ahead further and not make Link as my first one. A lot of people now will have amazing first ones because there's so many resources out there. And one good thing about this is that because the free patterns are mostly IPs like Pokemon, Avatar: The Last Airbender, Studio Ghibli, and My Little Pony, you kind of already have an idea of what it looks like. So that way as you're working with it and the shapes are fitting together, you can kind of more easily visualize how to put those shapes together. And also on this website, you can kind of see she has squares for difficulty levels, And with that, you can find some really easy things to make, so that way you can start dipping your toe into it, and then as you grow, you can make some more complicated things. So this is a great resource. Each of the patterns comes with a great tutorial on this website. So please, when all of us first started sewing, like I said, there were no resources online. So we all made these resources for you, so that way you can start ahead of where we did and go further than we did. And also, if you don't want to use one of these, you just want to start making different ponies, if you go on Etsy, there are hundreds of My Little Pony patterns. There's sitting, there's beanies, standing, laying, so many ponies. So there's a ton of patterns out there for you to learn from. And then as you get used to it and grow with it, you can definitely start trying to make your own and learning how pieces work together. For example, this is one of the first patterns that I learned how to do, and it is the ball shape. So it is these 4 petals. If you sew these together and turn it inside out, it makes like a ball. And so you can also experiment with that. If you add 3 petals, it can be like an oval. If you add 5 petals, it can be a flat circle. So there's all sorts of different things you can experiment with and learn from as you grow. It's all about that experimentation and seeing what works best for you, because there's no right answer to sewing. And those first experimentations led to some of these, which were some of my first more complicated made plushies that weren't just 2 flat pieces of fabric together. I remember being so proud, especially of the Cubone and Typhlosion here. Although I guess Typhlosion has a bit of a reputation since this panel was made. Maybe I'll swap them out later. But I remember being really proud of those 2, because that was some of my first like really complicated shapes. And so like I used different types of things to fit together, experimented with them, was so proud of them. Now I look at these and of course they're very basic, but I still remember like how fun it was to learn. And that's pretty much what you'll do. As you grow, you'll look back and be like, oh gosh, I was so beginner, but it gets better. Okay, now that you have an idea of what you want to make from any of these websites, Etsy, anything like that, it's time to get shopping. So like I said, when I first started, I used felt squares because they were cheap and I was still had an allowance back then. And despite what I did, I do not recommend felt as your first sewing material. No shame if it is, and no shame if you want to use it. But I found that one of the best materials to work with for beginners is fleece. It's easy to find at Joann, Walmart, or whatever local craft store you still have left near you. Most of them are closed now, but there's still some out there, and you can also find it online too. The fleece at these stores is generally decent enough quality. You won't run into material tearing. If you use felt and you like pull on it too hard, you can rip a hole in it. So that's the main reason we don't recommend it for like beginners, despite what I did. With fleece, it does have the same stretch to it, but you're not gonna rip a hole through it. The stores that carry it will also usually have a large enough variety of colors that you can find pretty much anything that you need, or at least close to it. It's also pretty affordable. Fleece is one of the cheaper materials that you can get. It's much cheaper than Minky. And of course, some of the fleeces can be a little more expensive because there's different types, different qualities and everything, but you can find something that works in your budget. And also because it's less expensive, if you make mistakes and do some of your good old trial and error, you're not gonna feel as bad that you're wasting that you're wasting fabric or anything, like if you got a really expensive piece first. And some people even stick with fleece over other materials as their fabric of choice, and that is perfectly fine. I have seen far too often people give advice that you need whatever expensive supplies to start, and that's really not true. So, sometimes if you're thinking you need a certain supply, a certain expensive supply, it's going to keep you from wanting to do it. You really just need whatever. When I started, like I said, I had that cookie tin of materials, of old thread and needles and everything. That's what I used. Just by all means, start with Minky if you want to, but there's no shame in practicing with something more affordable or whatever you have laying around. Some people even go to Goodwill and like get some material there to like rip up. And as for thread, if you are devoid of the cookie tin of sewing supplies that everyone has laying around somewhere, I recommend getting some white thread and black thread to start, as those 2 colors will pretty much take you through most of the projects that you want. White for lighter colors and black for darker colors. And then as you get more into it, you can get more matching colors to the different materials you use. But black and white, and even just white, will get you through the majority of what you need. For thread, you have the basic Coats and Clarks at Walmart or Joann is great for beginners. It's inexpensive, it's durable, it's easy to find, it's pretty great. And then eventually you'll make your way up to needing needing a sewing thread rack, especially if you get into embroidering. As for needles, I use the Schmetz brand for my sewing machine, and the ones I stitch with, I just get whatever's at the store. It can, if it can pierce through fabric, that's really all you need. There's no real fancy, I mean, there's fancy sewing needle brands, of course, but I've found that pretty much any sewing needle will get you through. And these tomatoes here are a great way to make sure that your needles stay in place and don't end up in your foot, which has happened to me more times than I can count. And the chili attached to them is actually filled with sand, or sometimes finely shredded pieces of metal, different materials. And if you put your needle in there, it can help sharpen it. So that way you can keep it nice and sharp and still piercing. And side note, if you have trouble putting the thread in the needle holes, which can be really hard, especially when you start, they make these little tools where it's a little wire that you put through the needle. You can put your thread through it and then you can pull it through the needle. So there's tools for everything. So this is my sewing machine. This is where the magic happens. I had a fancier one before this, but it broke before a convention. So I got this fast replacement at Walmart, and it worked so good that I have kept using it. Before this con, it actually went through 12 layers of Minky, so this thing is a trooper. And this one is a Brother machine. It's from Walmart, like I said. I paid $80 for it 6 years ago, and actually went to Walmart recently to see what cost it was now, and it's only $88, so it did not go up much at all. So there you go. It's a nice, easy, affordable sewing machine brand. It's also easy to swap out the bobbin and the bottom. Some of the machines, oh hey, did you have a question?
What model is it?
I don't know. I know what model my embroidery machine is. I don't actually know what model this is. It usually comes in different fancy looking colors, so it's just whatever basic Brother. I recommend Brother for beginner machines just because they are sturdy little guys, and most, like, if you need help or if you need like a technician or something, most of them know about Brothers and can help you with it. And there are, like I said, fancier models out there, but this one will get you through. I've been using this one for years now. I want to upgrade to a fancier model, but it's like, it still works. It's working just fine. So it's here for the long haul. And I also make long Furbies out of fur, and this thing can sew through fur like a dream. I have never had a single issue with it jamming, so it's a good machine. But a sewing machine does come with a lot of additional things to keep in mind. For example, one of the main things to keep in mind with sewing and a sewing machine is seam allowance. So when you're sewing with the sewing machine, you don't want to sew right on the edge of the fabric, because you will miss. When you're hand sewing, you're generally at the edge of the fabric going in and out. But when you're machine sewing, you'll have to go in a bit, so that way it's not going to slip off the edge, and you can make sure that it's getting all the stitches that it needs to get in. Most patterns you see, especially the ones on Sew Desune, which is what this is right here, show seam allowance here. So you cut along the solid line, and then when you're stitching, it's assuming you're stitching on the dotted line. So then that way it has seam allowance built in. You don't have to worry about that. As you get used to sewing with a sewing machine, you'll get more used to seam allowance.
Is that like a centimeter or 2 centimeters seam allowance?
I believe this is 2 centimeters, and because you're doing it like on the machine, you want to aim for like that 2 centimeter, but if you need to go further in, there's no shame with that. You can enlarge the pattern and make it bigger. And then as you get used to sewing, the seam allowance that you have will be less and less because you're used to like sewing on the edge. So it's just one of those things to experiment with. If you find it difficult to do this and keep the 2 centimeter, you can always make it bigger on your computer when you print it out.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right. And now here is an advanced tip for you with seam allowance. So this is something that a lot of beginners don't think about. I know I didn't think about this for a while after I started machine sewing, and learning it has been such a game changer. It'll give your plush such quality, and so it might be a little bit difficult to see on the screen, but this tutorial was made by Me Plush You, and you can kind of see it here. But with the seam allowance, this creates tension on the fabric. So if you're trying to turn it inside out, this little area here is going to create some tension on the fabric. And you can kind of see on the oh no side, it's bunched up. But on the yay side, it's not as bunched up. So you want to make snips in it. So you can kind of see on this tutorial here. And this panel will be up on my YouTube channel afterwards. Also, you can Google for these tutorials as well. You want to snip the portions of fabric at corners. So you want to snip into it to where the thread is. So when you turn it inside out, it's nice and flush, just like the yay side. And if you're doing a curve, you want to do little snips on it. So that way when you turn it inside out, you can see in the last image, it's nice and smooth versus being bumpy like these corners are right here. So that's an advanced tip. It might sound a little difficult, but as you work with it, you can kind of get an idea of how it goes. But that's an advanced tip of how to make some of your plushie lines look a lot easier. All right, so now that we're comfortable with our supplies and doing stitches, it's time for everyone's favorite plush fabric, Minky. I started using Minky a few years after fleece. I towed into it as I could afford more colors because Minky was pricey then. It's still pricey now. Back then it was about $12. Now it can go up to like $16 a yard depending on what site you're using. Minky fabric is commonly used in baby blankets and is known for its softness. Being used for baby blankets is why Minky is often found with the bumpy texture on it in stores. It's harder to find the smooth fabric in stores, but a lot of stores will have like the ones with the bumps on it. You can iron out those bumps. I don't recommend it because they will eventually come back because they're built into the fabric, and also it's just kind of a waste of your time. And with this, it also has a pile to it. The pile is a fancy word for the nap of the fabric, which is how the fabric fibers lay and stand out. Minky is usually a 3mm pile. For comparison, the pile of fur is usually 1 to 3 inches. And this pile is what makes it really soft because it's so fine. And with this pile, it becomes really important to familiarize yourself with how the pile lays on the fabric. So, might be hard to see here. I need to slide with this, but if you brush it one way, you kind of see it like, is this sort of way. But if you brush it this way, it's kind of like when you're petting a cat. It's like nice and smooth. So when you're doing that on your fabric, the area that is going to be like going down, like for a pony, they're probably going to be petting it this way. And that's the way you want your fabric to lay. And yeah, it's just like when you pet a cat. If you pet it the one way, it's going to get mad at you. If you pet it the other way, it's a happy kitty. And so when one of your pieces of your pattern is a different way than the others, it's really noticeable because if you pet your hand along it, you'll see one of them is going the wrong way. That's not so much a problem with fleece, but once you get into Minky, it's very noticeable. And with Minky, there's also stretch to it. So you can kind of see if I pull on it this way, it's got give. But if I pull on it this way, there's no give. So with this stretch, you can kind of experiment with your plushies, which I did here. So the king on the left side, this one right here, was made with the stretch going this way, so he's more tall. And then the one on the right side over here was made with the stretch going this way, so he's more thick. And you can kind of see the differences here. I'm glad I experimented with it because I much prefer the taller one. But as you're going, that's for you to experiment with. Maybe you like your plushies a little chunkier, so you'll want them this way, or maybe you like them a little taller, so you want them this way. It's all about that experimentation. And Minky, there is Minky at Joann's. It has a large stretch to it. It's so large that if you pull on it too hard, you will rip it because it's just really bad quality. The Minky at Hobby Lobby has less of a stretch than Joann. It can also be a little thicker, and so it can be a little harder to sew through because it's so thick. And then Shannon Minky, which is not really found in stores because Michael owns the store rights to it and they just never have it in stores. But you can find it online pretty much anywhere, and you can also find it at some local stores that are like mom and pop and not brick and mortar, or not like a big chain. But some of my favorite places to get Minky is Cali Quilt Co., Missouri Star Quilt Co., Fabric.com closed, Etsy. There's a lot of Etsy shops that sell really good Minky, so that's some places you can find out. There's also Hal Fabric, but I don't like using them just because when I get Minky, I need it on like a time crunch because I do cons so much, and how it takes a while to ship. So it's not my favorite place to get fabric, but that might work out for you. Also, now that we have a good understanding of some plush making techniques, you are not always going to continuously get better. It is not going to be continuously everything you make is better than the other, because sometimes you'll make new subjects, sometimes you'll be good at making ponies and then try to make like a dragon, and it is just a different beast. So it's more like this. It's more like up and down. You'll have plateaus, you'll have valleys, you'll have highs. So for every, that is the wrong one I'm hitting. So for every cute Dragonite plushie right here, some of these pictures are small because they're old. There is a horrible faced Lillipup dog plush. And for every really bad Trico, there is a good Cloud Jumper. And that also happened to me, of course. So here are some of the very first pony plushies I ever made. Pinky was my very first one. And you can kind of see that she doesn't look the best, but for a first try, she's not that bad. And then Cadence and Training Armor are 3 inches tall. I don't know why I did that to myself, but they're little babies, they're tiny. So for being that small, they look pretty good. But my next pony after these did not get better because I decided to pull an all-nighter to make a plushie for a cute boy. And it's this rarity right here. She is really bad. She looks like she's got her eyes stitched down. Her mane is just floppy. Lost its curl a long time ago. She's got these little stick potato legs. We call her Paterity. And I want to get rid of her so bad. I don't want her anymore. But my husband would kill me if I got rid of that. So she stays. She's a part of the family. She is an embarrassing plushie, but here she's going to stay there. She's going to get her time in the sun right now. All right. So, as you can see, you're not always going to do better and better. Sometimes you'll have some flops. Also, don't pull all-nighters to sew plushies. That is a lesson I haven't learned yet. But learn from my mistakes. All right. So, if you have a sewing machine, one of the things you can do with it is called applique or satin stitching. Applique is the fancy word for smoothly stitching one piece of fabric on top of another piece of fabric. So you'll find the setting on your sewing machine. Mine is that one, but it will probably be different on yours. And so you just go through and it'll get you a nice even finish. You can see on the Starlight Glimmer right here where her hair is nice and evenly stitched around using that applique. So it's really nice. And then when I first started making eyes, like on the Pinkie Pie I previously showed, I made them by sewing or gluing felt down to the fabric. But as I got better and more experienced, I started doing applique for the eyes on my sewing machine. So I used black at first just because it was cheap and I didn't have enough money to like get all the different colors, but it kind of gave it a nice cartoony look that I really like. So that's something that you might want to do for your eyes if you don't have an embroidery machine. And now that I have mentioned the embroidery machine, so the embroidery machine, I'm not going to go too super much into because this is a big purchase. An embroidery machine is expensive. This one right here on sale was still $800. They usually run anywhere from $500 to like several $1,000s. So it's a very big expense, and it's also a way to put eyes on the fabric. And this one right here is a Brother PE800. Walmart does have embroidery machines that do a 4x4 area. My Brother PE800 does a 5x7 area. You can see I'm working on one of the beanies on this right here. I don't recommend getting one of the Walmart machines. I've used 2 of them over my 20 years of sewing, and both of them broke within like a year or 2. They're not very good quality. So definitely recommend, if you're going to get an embroidery machine, to invest in a Brother or something a little better. And with embroidery, there is the programs you must learn to use. So these are a big learning curve. This one right here is for the body of Shining Armor. And basically, embroidery programs help you take an image and turn it into a file to put on the fabric. So you'll draw like the eye for Pinkie Pie, and then you'll put it in this program, and you're able to turn that drawing into something your embroidery machine can read and then stitch for you. So the one that I currently have, this is Hatch. This one is not good for everyone. None of these programs are good for everyone. There's a lot of different ones to experiment with. Most of them have a trial run, so that way you can test them out. When I first started sewing, I used SewArt because it was 75 flat rate for life, and it is very basic. There is not really any fanciness to it. It looks like it came from the 90s. This one is Hatch. The Hatch was $1,200 because I did $100 a month for 12 months, or it's $1,000 up front, so it's very expensive. But with it, I'm able to do a lot more things. You can kind of see on the side, like, all the different stuff you can do. You can reassign stitches, you can reshape things. And then there's also other embroidery programs too, like Embird and so many others. So it's all about experimentation and seeing what works for you if you decide to go the embroidery machine route. An embroidery machine is definitely something I worked up to. I think I was sewing for 10 years before I got my embroidery machine. So a lot of people make what are called in the hoop plushies. So that's what this is right here. And that's what these Pikmin are right here. Oh, also one other point, if you don't want to mess with the embroidery programs yet, but you have an embroidery machine, if you go on Etsy, you can find eyes and cutie marks from a variety of different makers, from Little Side Designs, Bakufun, Soapy Bacon. There's so many cutie marks and eyes and everything. So there's definitely, you can use those tools on Etsy. Just make sure to credit whoever you use when you post your plushie. So in the hoop plushies are basically made using the embroidery machine. That's how I make the beanies. I do the head, the ears, the body, and the hair. Sometimes I make the hair separate with my own patterns, but a lot of times I'll do the hair also on the embroidery machine, and then you stitch them together. And I also made these Pikmin here. And there are also a lot of in the hoop patterns on Etsy and everything, and it's a really nice way to make some quick plushies because it does all the sewing for you, all the embroidery for you. Everything is nice and uniform. I know I probably explained that poorly, but you can kind of catch the drift. And getting an embroidery machine is what really gave me the confidence to do conventions. I've been doing conventions for 10 years now, and I'd always wanted to try them, but I found excuses why I couldn't or shouldn't. But getting the embroidery machine, which really helped make all the processes streamline and help make things a lot easier, is what really gave me the confidence to start trying them. And here is my last year's Ciderfest table. I need to update that with this year's Ciderfest table. But from my very first table, which this is my very first convention table right here back in 2015, to this one from 2023, it has been a long journey. My first BronyCon was sadly the last BronyCon, which is a sad time to start that journey, but it's been an amazing journey. And without the My Little Pony community, I wouldn't have pushed myself to get as good as I have at plushies, because My Little Bronies, they really encourage plush makers. Bronies love their plush makers. So one thing I like to do is occasionally make the same thing and see how I've improved. So here is Ocellus. This is the very first Ocellus I made at the very top. And it is made using my chibi pattern, because when I first started, I was used to doing anime cons, so I made them like really chibi and weird. But then I started experimenting with making a pony standing pattern, a more typical show accurate pattern. So I've been testing and everything, and even this year I've really evolved this pattern. So that's the same thing. The more you do it, the better you'll get. You can kind of see this over the years. The Ocellus looks better and better and better. And this one right here is actually part of that stretch. I did the stretch tall, so she has long legs and is not very sturdy on her feet, but the others have the stretch where she's thicker, so she's able to stand a lot easier. And the same thing here. This is the Sphinx. I realized I made one every 2 years, so 2025, one of those cons, you'll see another Sphinx. And it's really interesting just like experimenting and seeing what you can do. So like my 2019 Sphinx and my 2023 Sphinx look so different, and you can see like the improvement as I have worked with that. So if you're ever stuck, I recommend doing whatever art you're doing, be it sewing or drawing. If you redraw or re-sew an older subject that you did, you can kind of see how you've grown, and it really helps inspire you. So I will close out this section because after this we're going to go over the other makers in our fandom with one of my favorite comics. So this right here, he says, "My art sucks. How did you get so good?" By drawing a lot. And he says, "But I tried that. It didn't work." And he shows his big pile of work. And then the guy says, "Oh, well, keep trying." And he has a mountain of work, a mountain of drawings that he's done. And that's basically what it is. Recently, I got one of those emails that's like, "We're going to close your Photo Bucket account." And I totally forgot I even had this Photo Bucket account. And so I went on it and I found hundreds of plush I didn't even remember making. And like, they're so bad. Some of them were good. Some of them were really bad. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And it's true. You have a mile of, like a huge pile of work that you have gone through and made. So like your favorite makers that you love have this pile of just all the plushies that they've made. So if you're not as good as your favorite plush maker or Me Plush You or something right now, you will, like, if you keep sticking with it, you'll get your own style, your own aesthetic. You'll find your own good. So absolutely stick with it if it's something that you want to. So now let's go ahead and pivot to the creators of our fandom. And there's no better place to start than with Me Plush You. So here is some of her work. Her work is the best. If you love pony plushies, you know Me Plush You. She is one of the best makers in the fandom, and she is a huge inspiration to me. She does video turnarounds of plushies on a Lazy Susan, and like there's no bad angles. Every single angle is just picture perfect. They are amazing. And she had these inspiring words for everyone. "I've been making pony plush for about 10 years now, and I think it's important to keep it fun. Keep trying new patterns, new techniques, new materials, keep evolving. Like with any art, don't compare your work too much to others, but look at your own progress and see how far you've come." And that is her first plush, a Pinky. A lot of people have Pinky as their first plushie. And she's still really good. She is adorable, but you can see from this Pinky to what she can do now, just the huge progress. And you'll have that too. And next up we have Jack Larson, an amazing plush maker from Russia. They're known for their fluffy hair manes, which just look amazing in person, and they're so soft. It's brushable, and it's basically what Hasbro wishes their brushable hair ponies look like. And then next we have Jelly Pony, or they were Basil Leafy on Twitter. I believe they changed their name now. But Jelly Pony is an amazing creator. They were suggested to me by so many happy customers, and I need to update this file because they have made a Wild Manes plushie, and it is so good. It looks like it just stepped out of the show. It's so perfect, and Jelly Pony is the nicest person ever. And she wanted me to share with you. "I would want to say, I want aspiring plush artists to know that you can make plush even if you don't have an embroidery machine. Don't be afraid to experiment different fabrics, designs, and textures. It can help make your work seem unique." And that's one thing. Jelly Pony does not have an embroidery machine. She hand embroiders that with like the big hoop and just goes into it. It's so impressive. And this right here is her first plushie. So you can see it's quite the growth. This thing though has so much personality. I love this plushie. It's so cute. And next we have Peruser of Pieces, an awesome maker. And they provided me with so many plushies to show off. I had to just pick a few. It was hard to narrow it down though because they're all so good. And they're also very unique. Like if you see one of those, you know it is Peruser style. And so they wanted to share with you guys. As for what I would like to say, I want to highlight my growing desire to portray more emotions in my work through not only expressions, but also posing and body language. And that's something I intend to work toward in the future. And you can kind of see that right there with the cheese sandwich and Pinkie Pie. I would also say for anyone starting out making art of any kind and feeling like they aren't good enough, look at my first Pinkie Pie, which is right here. This is Peruser's first plushie, and compare it to my current work. If you put in the time and the effort to better yourself in your craft, you can create your own masterpieces. But if you give up on yourself before you even have a chance to bloom, you'll never know just how far you can go. And that is so inspiring, very inspiring words from Peruser. And then next up is Rubio Wolf, who's in the vendor hall next door. Rubio is a long-time plush maker, very classic plush maker. Everyone knows Rubio. And here's a selection of some of their works, some very awesome ones. I always like that they do themed plushies. Like for this Ciderfest, they did a bunch of bat ponies One year they did a bunch of sea ponies, and at Everfree 2022 they did a bunch of Kieran. So they're always doing different, unique, awesome things. And so she wanted me to share with you guys. Don't be afraid to mess up. Just keep trying. Everyone has to start somewhere. Whether you make your own patterns or use ones made by others, like My Little Waifu and So Desune, for instance, there's no wrong answer. Let your creativity shine. Absolutely. And this is her first plush, which is so impressive because it's made using that rose minky fabric. That fabric sucks to work with. It sheds like crazy. It's got a weird stretch to it. So it is so impressive that her first plush is made with that. And next we have Fleece Friendship. Like I was saying earlier, fleece is a legit material to stay with, and it's perfectly valid to keep using fleece if that's what you want to do. These amazing plush show what awesome plush you can make with fleece. And they wanted to share, I'm Fleece Friendship, and I make plushies out of fleece, which is pretty unique. Anyone can learn to make a plush. You don't need all the fancy equipment to get started. All it takes is a lot of practice and a good attitude. And they also shared with me their first plushie, which is Cadence here. And that is such a bold choice for your first pony plush because she's complicated. She is a complicated girl, so that is so impressive that they went with Cadence for their first. Most artists usually do Pinky, like I said. And then one of my favorite makers is Chibi Pets. Chibi Pets is always pushing their style and making some really awesome things, and they have some amazing works. And they also have a Patreon where you can pledge to get some amazing patterns every month that are more complex and so rewarding to work with. And if you go to Chibi Pets and you contact them and tell them about this panel, they said that they will give you a discount on your first month on the Patreon. So you should check them out. They have so many patterns, so many amazing patterns every month, and very complex ones, so you can learn a lot from them. And then next up, we have another awesome classic plush maker, Lumi the Kieran. I always love how they do their eyes. Their eyes are so unique. They use a glitter with them, and it gives it such a nice shine. It's so pretty. And they're going to be at Van Hoover this year, so if you're going to be there, they are going to have a ton of awesome plushies. And so they wanted to share, I guess just keep trying. Failure doesn't stop you. You just keep trying new things. Push yourself and try again. Laugh at the mistakes and goofiness and have fun. Don't forget it's materials. You can remake it, you can resew it, you can learn and improve. Do your best and remember that your best will look different every single day. And this Fluttershy is their first pony plushie, and it's really impressive because they included clothes with their very first plushie, which is that's just awesome. It's really interesting. You never see people do like the clothes and everything because it's so complicated with their first. And next we have a very classic plush maker, Allegrinix. They're well known for two things. First, they're these cute little itty bitties that are made from felt. They're only like an inch long. They're very tiny, but they're mighty. They're full of personality. And the second thing that they are known for is their love of Celestia. They definitely praise the sun. And the Chaos Celestia here is an upgraded Aurora plushie. They do so many awesome things, make so many interesting and fun Celestias. And like they have made pretty much every single Celestia. Like Pink Celestia is theirs based on the toy of her when they were making her more pink. And she really likes taking old plushies of Celestia, official ones, and then upgrading them, which is really cool. And they had this to say, you don't need a fancy embroidery machine to make clean eyes and cutie marks. I don't have one. Fleece is still a good alternative to Minky, and sometimes those official plushies with the nasty brushable manes just need a glow up. Also, I like Celestia a lot. Wise words, wise words. And then next up we have QT Pony. He is an amazing life-size plush maker. He is one of the premier life-size makers, and his plush are just awesome. Like you can see them and tell it is one of his. He gives them amazing accessories, hoodies, socks, bows, tail bows, so many awesome ones. And he also like that jacket right there. I've seen that one in person. It's so good. It is so good. And he utilizes both minky and fur for his manes, and they look so accurate. It's just so good. And this right here is his very first pony plushie. This is Twilight. He made different test patterns, and this was the result of all of his experimentation. He wanted to say, if I can make this Twilight here, then I think realistically anybody can make a Twilight plush. and absolutely no idea what I was doing. And like hibiscus, I didn't really utilize any resources either. I just learned myself as I went. And then last but not least, we have Blackwater Plush. Her plush are very much loved in the pony community, plush community, because she makes these awesome laying life-size plushies, and they have a very unique look to them, especially in the face. You can see one and tell it's a Blackwater plushie. She had this to share with us. The first one is always the worst, but also will always have a special place in your heart, which is very true. I have a very special place in my heart for Link. It's shoved down in a box where he can't come out. One thing I love about Blackwater is they do a really cool logo on the hoof, so that way it just always shows that this is their work, and it's really cool. And also, I really love the Autumn Blaze hooves with the like cloven. That's so cool. That's such a good job. So that wraps up our plush feature and our time together. Did anyone have any questions before we go?
When did you get your mascot made?
Oh, my little pony plush? I was going to make it for Ciderfest, but I did not finish the hair in time because I don't know why I made her hair so complicated. It's just so hard. So she's still bald, but she'll be here at the next one. So. And I believe you had a question. I did not hear you.
What was the site with the free patterns in the store again?
Oh, sorry. The site with free patterns, if you Google So Desune, SEWDESUNE, if you Google that, you'll find her website. It's cholinight.com, but if you Google So Desune, it'll pop up. So I highly recommend that. And like I said, I'll have this panel on YouTube as well after it. So if you look up Hibiscus Stitch there, you can find it, and it'll have all the slides, so that way you can also easily find it too. And any other questions? No, all right. So thank you everyone for joining me in this panel, and I hope you have a good time at Ciderfest, and I hope you have a good plush making journey. Thank you everyone. Yeah.
Do you have any vouchers?
I don't have any QT vouchers. There we go. Hello, hello. Thank you guys so much for helping me. I really appreciate that. Oh, I gotta turn this off.